I swear, if someone had told me a year ago that my wife, Jessica, would be the kind of woman to grind her nails into my back in bed one week and then grind herself on another man the next, I would have laughed them out of the room. We'd been married for 8 years. 8 years of shared bills, shared vacations, and the kind of inside jokes that made strangers roll their eyes. But here I was, 37 years old, standing outside a hotel bar on a Thursday night, watching my wife's lips melt into a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Her business dinners had been getting suspiciously frequent. At first, I brushed it off. Jessica was an ambitious marketing manager, always networking, always building relationships. I thought that's what I loved about her, her drive. But lately, she'd been coming home smelling faintly of men's cologne that I didn't own, with her hair a little too messy for just a dinner meeting. I'd noticed lipstick smudged slightly out of place, like it had been reapplied in a hurry. That night, I followed her. I didn't even mean to, at least, that's what I told myself, but my gut had been screaming for weeks. She'd said she was meeting a client named Daniel. Said he was important. Said if this deal went through, it could change everything for her career. I believed her, until I saw her walk into the bar wearing the short black dress she told me she hated because it was too tight to sit in. I stayed back, in the corner of the lobby, where I could see without being seen. She was all smiles when she spotted him. Daniel, tall, clean-cut, the kind of guy who probably had a cologne ad on his bathroom mirror. They hugged. Not the quick, polite hug of coworkers. No, her hands slid around his waist and lingered. His mouth brushed her ear, and she laughed in that throaty way she hadn't used with me in months. They ordered drinks. She touched his arm. He leaned in, close enough that her eyes half closed like she was savoring the warmth. My stomach knotted. Then I saw it, his hand sliding up her thigh under the table. She didn't flinch. Didn't pull away. She just kept talking, like nothing was wrong. Like it was normal for another man's fingers to be tracing lines up her leg in the middle of a public place. I knew what was going to happen before it did. They didn't linger long at the bar. She grabbed his hand like a teenager sneaking away from a prom chaperone, and they disappeared toward the elevator. My pulse was pounding so hard in my ears I almost didn't hear the ding of the doors closing behind them. I stood there for a full minute, frozen. My wife, my Jessica, was upstairs with another man. It wasn't speculation anymore. It wasn't paranoia. It was happening, right above my head. And you know the worst part? I didn't storm up there. I didn't barge in. I didn't catch them in the act like some dramatic scene in a movie. I just stood there. My fists were clenched so tight my nails dug half-moons into my palms, but my legs wouldn't move. I was afraid, not of what I'd see, but of what it would mean. Because if I went up there, if I saw it with my own eyes, there'd be no going back. I left before they came down. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my truck outside our house, staring at the porch light I'd put up 2 summers ago, wondering how long she'd been lying to me. Wondering if the woman who came home at 2 a.m., smelling of whiskey and a man's skin, would look me in the eyes and tell me she loved me. By the time she finally slipped into bed beside me, whispering some excuse about last-minute negotiations, I knew one thing for certain: this wasn't the beginning of something bad. This was me stumbling into the middle of a movie where the ending was already written. I'd just been too blind to read the script. After that night outside the hotel, my brain wouldn't shut off. Every little thing Jessica did was suddenly under a microscope. The way she kept her phone face down on the counter. The way she'd start typing and then swipe her screen away when I walked into the room. The way she suddenly had to work late 3 nights a week but came home with her hair tousled and her perfume barely hanging on. I told myself I wouldn't become that guy, the paranoid husband who reads too much into everything. But it was like trying not to breathe. I couldn't ignore it anymore. My gut was in overdrive, and it wasn't wrong. The real blow came one Saturday morning. Jessica was in the shower, her phone buzzing on the nightstand. I don't even know why I reached for it, maybe some stupid part of me was still hoping to prove myself wrong. But the screen lit up, and there it was, Daniel Redhart. I unlocked it. Yes, I knew her passcode. 8 years of marriage, you pick up these things. The messages weren't just flirty, they were filthy. Not in the cartoonish, teenage way, but in the kind of way two people talk when they've been behind closed doors and know exactly how to push each other's buttons. They weren't just meeting for drinks or discussing campaigns. They were talking about the last time they were together, how wild she'd been, how he couldn't stop thinking about the hotel. He asked when she could get away again. She sent a winking emoji and said, "Soon." Husband's getting suspicious. My hands were shaking. My mouth tasted like metal. I scrolled back through weeks of messages, photos, plans, inside jokes I'd never heard her tell me. She'd told him things about me, about how I was clingy and controlling because I wanted us to have dinner together at home. I found one message that made my stomach churn. He's always asking about my day like I'm some fragile flower. It's suffocating. That hit me harder than the physical cheating. Because I remembered overhearing her tell her sister the same thing a month before, how I was too needy, because I liked spending weekends with her, because I actually cared. That day, I decided fine, if she wanted space, she could have all the space she wanted. I stopped being clingy. I stopped asking. I gave her exactly what she said she wanted. Apparently, she'd filled that space with Daniel. When she came out of the shower, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone still in my hand. She froze when she saw my face. "Why are you on my phone?" she asked, voice already sharp, like I was the one out of line. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her and said, "How long?" Her eyes flickered. It was tiny, but I saw it, the microsecond where she decided whether to lie or confess. She went with the lie. "I don't know what you're talking about." I held up the phone. "Daniel. The hotel. Thursday night. How long?" She crossed her arms, tilting her head like I was a child misbehaving. "So now you're spying on me?" Wow, Ethan. Real mature. That's when I knew this was going to get ugly. She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't going to beg. She was going to turn it around, make me the villain. And that stung more than I expected. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just said, "Don't lie to me." "Not now." But Jessica, my wife, smirked. Actually smirked. "If you really think I'm doing something, then maybe you should ask yourself why I felt the need to look somewhere else." And just like that, I realized, she wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was going to defend this. That was the moment I stopped hoping I was wrong, that I'd always imagined that if I caught my wife cheating, there'd be shouting. Glass breaking. Maybe me storming out and slamming the door so hard it shook the frame. But the truth is, betrayal has a way of hollowing you out before the anger even kicks in. That morning, after reading those messages to Daniel, I didn't feel explosive, I felt empty. Jessica, on the other hand, seemed ready for a fight. She stood there in her robe, hair damp from the shower, arms crossed like she was about to argue over who left the dishes in the sink. "You done going through my private stuff?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "No, Jessica. I'm not done. We're not done until you stop acting like I'm crazy and admit what you've been doing." Her lips curved into that same smug smirk. "What exactly do you think I've been doing? Talking to a friend? Flirting a little? Wow, lock me up." I clenched my fists. "Don't play games." Thursday night. The hotel. The messages. "You've been with him." Instead of denying it outright, she rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic, Ethan. You've been with plenty of women before me, what's the difference? That was her style, never directly answering. Just throwing out enough bait to pull me into defending myself. But not this time. Don't compare your cheating to my past before we met. I've been faithful to you. And you? I shook my head, my voice catching, you've been lying in my face. Jessica let out a short laugh. Oh, please. You're acting like I murdered someone. You've been suffocating me for years. Always wanting to know where I am, who I'm with, asking about my day like you're my dad or something. I told you I needed space. You didn't give it to me, so, she shrugged, I found it somewhere else. Her words hit harder than if she'd just admitted she'd been bored. She was blaming me. Blaming me for caring. And somewhere deep down, I realized she actually believed it. So that's your excuse? I asked quietly. That I loved you too much? She smirked again, like she'd won a point. You call it love. I call it control. I should have been furious. Instead, I felt this strange clarity, like I was finally seeing the real Jessica for the first time. The woman who, months ago, I thought was my partner wasn't standing in front of me anymore. Or maybe she never had been. You know what's funny? I said. The night I overheard you telling your sister I was too clingy, I decided to back off. I stopped asking. I stopped being the guy who planned weekends for us. I gave you what you wanted. And you filled that space with him. For the first time, her smirk faltered, just slightly. You're twisting this, she said. You always twist things so you can play the victim. That did it. The heat in my chest finally caught fire. Victim? I caught you cheating. With proof. And you're standing here acting like I drove you to it. I took a step closer. You didn't trip and fall into his bed, Jessica. You chose it. Over and over. Her eyes narrowed, and her voice dropped to a cold whisper. Maybe I chose him because he doesn't make everything about himself. That one stung, but I didn't let it show. I just nodded slowly. Got it. So now I know exactly who you are. She looked at me like I was the crazy one, but something in her eyes shifted, maybe annoyance that I wasn't begging, maybe fear that I'd stop caring entirely. She grabbed her phone from my hand, muttered something about needing to get ready, and walked out of the room. The sound of the bedroom door clicking shut was louder than any slam. In that moment, I realized the marriage I thought I had was already gone. The woman I loved wasn't coming back. The days after that confrontation were like living in a house with a ghost, except the ghost was alive, walking around in yoga pants, sipping coffee, and texting the man she cheated on me with. Jessica didn't apologize. She didn't even acknowledge what we'd talked about that morning. Instead, she carried on as if I'd just overreacted to finding out she'd been talking to Daniel. I'd be sitting at the kitchen table, staring into my mug of cold coffee, and she'd breeze past me like I was part of the furniture. No guilt. No shame. Just indifference, and that was somehow worse than an outright fight. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words in my head. You're too clingy. You suffocate me. You make everything about yourself. Over and over, until I started questioning whether she was right. Maybe I was too much. Maybe asking about her day was some kind of crime in her world. But then the rational part of me, the part that still knew how to think, would snap back, no, Ethan. That's called caring. That's called loving someone. The hardest part wasn't the cheating itself, it was the disrespect after. She still went out for drinks twice that week. She still left her phone locked and face down on the counter. She still came home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. And she'd look me dead in the eyes when she said she'd been with coworkers. One night, I heard her in the bathroom with the door closed, whispering. I leaned against the wall, listening. Her voice was soft, playful, Jessica's flirting voice. Yeah, I'll figure something out, she said. He's being, well, himself. Clingy again. I could practically hear Daniel's smug chuckle through the phone. That's when something in me cracked. Not into rage, not yet, but into something colder. I stopped talking to her unless I had to. I stopped cooking dinner for both of us. If she wanted space, I was going to give her enough space to choke on. By the fourth day after the confrontation, the house felt like a waiting room. Silent, stale, suffocating. I'd leave for work early just to avoid her, and she'd come home late just to avoid me. We were married in name only, and deep down, I knew she liked it that way. But here's the thing, pain has layers. At first, it was pure heartbreak. Then, confusion. Then, the sharp sting of humiliation. But under all of that, something new started to grow, clarity. I started to see her, not the version I'd built up in my head, but the actual Jessica. The one who could smile in my face while lying through her teeth. The one who could twist my love into a weapon to use against me. The one who would rather destroy our marriage than admit she'd done something wrong. On the seventh night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room in the dark, phone in hand, staring at our wedding photo on the wall. She was laughing in that picture, her hand on my chest, looking at me like I was the center of her universe. And I realized, she'd probably looked at Daniel that same way. The thought was like swallowing glass. At 2 a.m., she came downstairs in her robe. She didn't even look surprised to see me awake. "You're still up?" she asked flatly, like we were casual acquaintances sharing a hotel room. "Yeah," I said. Thinking. She shrugged and poured herself a glass of water. "Don't overthink, Ethan. It's not healthy." Then she padded back upstairs without another word. That was it. That was the moment the last thread of hope snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there in the dark, realizing that the woman I'd promised my life to wasn't just gone, she'd been gone long before I caught her. The only thing left was to decide what I was going to do about it. By the end of the second week, I'd stopped pretending there was anything to salvage. There was no rough patch, no misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with therapy or a vacation. What Jessica and I had wasn't a marriage anymore, it was two strangers occupying the same space, with one of them openly loyal to someone else. I'd spent nights replaying every sign I'd ignored. The late work dinners. The cold shoulders. The shift in how she touched me, less warmth, more obligation. But the memory that kept me up most was overhearing her tell her sister I was too clingy for wanting to spend weekends together. Back then, I'd tried to give her what she wanted, distance. I'd pulled back. And she'd taken that gap and filled it with Daniel. That's what made me realize, it didn't matter what I did. The problem wasn't me. It was her. The decision started as a quiet seed. I didn't write it down. I didn't tell anyone. But in my head, the words were clear: I'm done. Not the kind of done you say in a fight before storming off, but the real kind. The kind that comes when you know you're never going to look at someone the same way again. The moment it solidified came on a Sunday afternoon. I'd gone into the garage to look for some tools, and tucked behind a box of old Christmas decorations, I found a wine bottle in a gift bag. Expensive wine. The kind we'd only ever bought for special occasions. I pulled it out, thinking maybe it was a surprise for me, some tiny attempt to mend things. But then I saw the card. For Thursday. Can't wait. D. That was it. She wasn't even being careful anymore. She was planning dates with him in our home, hiding gifts from me in the garage we both used. The audacity wasn't just disrespect, it was contempt. That night, I didn't wait for her to get home. I packed a duffel bag with enough clothes for a week, my important papers, and the watch my father had given me before he passed. I left the rest. I didn't need it. When she walked in around midnight, she saw the bag by the door. "Going somewhere?" she asked, leaning against the frame like this was just another one of our little spats. "Yeah," I said, zipping it up. "Out." She raised an eyebrow. "What, you're running away? Can't handle a little adult reality?" I straightened and looked her dead in the eye. "No, Jessica. I can't handle being married to someone who cheats, lies, and then blames me for it." Her smirk faltered, just for a second, before returning. "You'll be back. You always make threats you can't keep." I slung the bag over my shoulder. "This isn't a threat." Walking out that door wasn't dramatic. There was no yelling, no tears, no slammed doors. It was quiet, almost anticlimactic. But inside, it felt like stepping out of a burning building and finally breathing air that didn't taste like smoke. I didn't know exactly what the future looked like. I didn't know if I'd stay with a friend, get a hotel, or just drive until I couldn't anymore. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: whatever was ahead of me was better than what I was leaving behind. Jessica didn't follow me to the door. She didn't call after me. And that silence was the final confirmation I needed. I wasn't walking away from someone who cared. I was walking away from someone who'd already let go a long time ago. The first night away from Jessica didn't feel like freedom. It felt like being dropped into a foreign city without a map. I checked into a cheap roadside motel, the kind with buzzing neon lights and scratchy blankets, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the peeling wallpaper. My phone was silent. No calls. No texts. Part of me hated that, and part of me realized that silence was exactly what I needed. I thought I'd cry. I thought I'd rage. Instead, I just sat there feeling nothing. Numb. The emotional equivalent of static on an old TV. Maybe it was shock. Maybe my mind hadn't caught up with what I'd actually done, walked out on my wife without a real plan for what came next. The numbness didn't last. By the third night, the loneliness started creeping in. The motel room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. I'd go to grab my phone, instinctively wanting to text Jessica something stupid, like a meme, or a joke, or just, "good night," and then I'd remember. We weren't us anymore. She wasn't the person I could reach for in the dark. She was the reason I was here. But between those waves of loneliness, there were moments, tiny, almost unnoticeable, of relief. Like not having to wonder if she was lying when she said she was working late. Or not seeing her walk in smelling of someone else's cologne. Or not sitting at dinner pretending to believe whatever excuse she was spinning that night. On the fourth day, I called my old friend Mark. I hadn't told him anything yet, partly because I didn't want the pity, partly because saying it out loud would make it too real. But when he picked up and said, "Man, you sound like hell," it all spilled out. I told him about Daniel, the hotel, the messages, the confrontation, everything. There was a long pause. Then he said, "Ethan, you should have left the second you saw her with him. But better now than never." That stuck with me. Better now than never. It didn't make the nights easier, but it gave them a shape. I wasn't drifting aimlessly anymore, I was moving away from something poisonous. Jessica texted me for the first time on the fifth day. "Where are you?" "No, I miss you." "No, can we talk?" Just a question, like I was late coming home from work. I stared at it for a long time before replying. "Out." She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. That weekend, I drove to a park we used to visit when things were good. I sat on a bench watching families walk by, kids laughing, couples holding hands. I realized I didn't miss Jessica, I missed the version of her I thought existed. The woman in my head had been gone for a long time. The one in real life was someone I didn't even like anymore. By Sunday night, I knew I wasn't going back. The loneliness was still there, but so was something else: space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to start imagining a future that didn't involve constant suspicion and gaslighting. It hit me then, leaving hadn't just been the right choice. It had been the only choice. Staying would have been slow suicide, death by 1,000 tiny betrayals. I went back to the motel that night and, for the first time since walking out, I slept without waking up in the middle of the night. No ceiling staring. No knot in my stomach. Just sleep. And when I woke up, the air didn't feel heavy anymore. It took me almost 3 weeks to agree to see Jessica again. Not because she begged, she didn't, but because I wanted to end it on my terms. I was tired of walking away from conversations with her feeling like she'd twisted everything upside down. I needed one meeting where I said exactly what I wanted to say, without her turning me into the villain. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop halfway between our house, well, her house now, and the motel I'd been staying in. I chose the place deliberately. Public. Neutral. No home field advantage for either of us. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting at a corner table with her phone in hand. She didn't even look up right away. When she finally did, she gave me a half-smile that was so fake it practically squeaked. "Ethan," she said, like she was greeting an old coworker she barely remembered. I sat down without returning the smile. "Jessica." For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. She finally broke the silence. "So, what now? You done sulking?" That laughably casual tone lit a fire in me, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not sulking. I'm done." Her eyebrows lifted. "Done, like, divorce done?" "Yes. Divorce done." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms like I'd just announced I was quitting a gym membership. "Wow. So you're just throwing away 8 years because of a few texts?" I almost laughed. A few texts. That was her version of events. I leaned forward. "It wasn't just texts, Jessica. It was the hotel. It was the lies. It was you telling Daniel I was suffocating you for caring about you. It was you standing in our bedroom, smirking in my face instead of admitting you were wrong. And it was every single time you came home smelling like him and expected me to swallow whatever excuse you fed me." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't interrupt. "I loved you," I said, my voice tighter now. "I gave you everything I had. And you didn't just cheat, you made me feel like it was my fault you did it. That's not a marriage. That's manipulation." She finally spoke. "You were too much, Ethan. Always hovering, always asking. Maybe if you'd given me space from the start." I cut her off. "Stop. Just stop. You don't get to rewrite this. You didn't cheat because I asked about your day. You cheated because you wanted to. You lied because it was easier than being honest. And you blamed me because you didn't have the guts to take responsibility." Her face hardened. "You're really going to sit there and act like you were perfect?" "I'm not perfect," I said. "But I was faithful. And I was honest. That's more than you can say." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clink of coffee cups and the low hum of conversations around us filled the air. I realized then that this was it, there was nothing left between us worth saving. I stood up. "You'll hear from my lawyer next week. Keep the house. Keep the furniture. I don't want anything from you." She looked at me with something between annoyance and disbelief. "You're just walking away?" "Yes," I said. "Because you've already shown me exactly who you are. And I'm not going to spend another day pretending you're someone else." I left without looking back. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt lighter. Like I'd finally closed a door that should have been shut the night I saw her walk into that hotel. It's strange how quiet life feels when you finally cut out the noise. For weeks after that last meeting with Jessica, I kept expecting my phone to light up with some new attempt from her to pull me back in, an angry text, a sudden apology, "we can fix this" speech. But nothing came. And that silence, instead of hurting, became the clearest confirmation that I'd done the right thing. The first real change I noticed was in my mornings. When we were together, I used to wake up tense, bracing myself for whatever mood she'd be in. Would she be cold and distant? Or falsely sweet, overcompensating for whatever she'd been doing behind my back? Now, I woke up without that dread. I'd make coffee in peace, sit by the window, and watch the sun creep across the parking lot of the temporary apartment I'd rented. No lies. No pretending. Just quiet. With that quiet came thinking, too much thinking, some days. I went back over every moment from the past 2 years, trying to pinpoint the exact second things started rotting. I realized it wasn't one big blow. It was slow erosion. She'd been slipping away long before Daniel showed up. Maybe if I'd seen it earlier, I could have stopped it. But then again, maybe not. You can't force someone to value loyalty if they never did in the first place. There were nights when anger still hit me like a freight train. I'd be driving home from work, and suddenly I'd picture her sitting across from him in that hotel bar, laughing that throaty laugh she hadn't used with me in months. I'd grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, not because I wanted her back, but because I hated that she'd taken the best of me and treated it like it was nothing. But here's the part one didn't expect: the longer I stayed away, the more I saw her for what she truly was. Without the emotional fog, I could look back and see all the moments I'd brushed off as harmless quirks, her constant need for attention, her way of twisting every argument so she came out as the victim, her casual disrespect when she thought no one was watching. Those weren't quirks. Those were signs. Red flags waving right in my face, and I'd ignored them because I thought love meant accepting everything. I started talking to people, men who'd been through similar betrayals. Different details, same story. Every one of them said the same thing: the hardest part isn't the cheating itself, it's realizing the person you loved never really existed the way you thought they did. You fall in love with an image, and when it shatters, you're left holding the sharp edges. The best advice I got was from Mark, the friend I'd called in those early days. We were sitting on his back porch one night, beer in hand, when he said, "You can forgive, Ethan. Hell, you can even forget. But don't ever let her back into your life. Some doors, once closed, need to stay locked." He was right. Forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for me. I didn't want to carry her betrayal like a weight for the rest of my life. I wanted to set it down and walk away from it completely. If I could give one piece of advice to any man reading this, it would be this: if your gut tells you something's wrong, listen. Don't let love blind you to disrespect. And the moment you see undeniable proof, don't wait for apologies, explanations, or promises to change. Leave. Because the longer you stay, the smaller you become, and no relationship is worth shrinking yourself into nothing. Jessica is a chapter I'll never reread. And now, for the first time in years, I'm ready to write something new. Something honest. Something mine.